them on their celebrations and welcome them to the Parliament, where indeed the people's business continues to be pursued and our democracy preserved. Mr. President, there are two matters before us on the agenda. There is the matter of the report of the Joint Select Committee on the amendments to the ZOSO Act, which will be led, its approval rather, will be led by Senator Samuda. And there is also, of course, the representation of the people's postponement of elections of municipal corporations and City Municipalities Act 2022. I will refer henceforth to the bill that seeks to postpone the local government, which I will lead. Mr. President, it is intended to take the latter first, and we therefore start with the matter of local government.
Thank you very much, Minister.
In this context, Mr. President, members would be aware that the local government elections for members to serve on the respective councils of the municipal corporations and mayors of city municipalities are slated to be held every 4 years. The local government election was last conducted on November 28, 2016, and had therefore been due by the 29th day of November 2020. The 8th schedule of the Representation of the People's Act provides for a period of extension of 90 days, which would have allowed for the next local government elections to be held no later than the end of February 2021. However, due to the serious and novel circumstances brought on by this protracted pandemic, the government had then considered that a postponement of only 90 days was not sufficient. By way of reminder, Mr. President, at that time, and that is around November 29, 2020, Jamaica had about 54 daily new infections. 70 persons were hospitalized, and we had a positivity rate of 8.3%. In hindsight, the numbers look comparatively small, but as we have all been going through the pandemic together, we are all quite clear on what the impact was then on our society and economy. Capacity was still being built locally for bed space within our hospitals, and vaccines were not yet approved or available globally. We might recall that at that time, the Alpha variant was the only one of significance, presence, and of concern globally. So thankfully, in light of the protracted and unpredictable nature of the pandemic, the government then sought and received parliamentary approval for a longer period of postponement, and more particularly for another year, which, but for this bill which is before us today, would expire on the 28th of this month. To further contextualize our circumstances, Mr. President, on January 23rd, when the bill before us was passed in that other place, Jamaica had 527 new daily positives and a 35.7% positivity rate. COVID hospital beds were at capacity. But let us look back just a bit. Throughout the period of postponement, Mr. President, Jamaica's state of affairs in relation to the pandemic has been closely monitored. Work has been done to build bed capacity and oxygen capacity, and it was over this period that vaccines became available and administration thereof started. It has indisputably been a challenging period for the country, for our people. The Ministry of Health and Wellness has shared a lot of information daily on infections, persons who have died, persons who have been hospitalized, recoveries, positivity rates, and other elements which are regularly reviewed in respect of the pandemic. And this is outside of our broader understanding that persons' mental health and well-being have been under strain due to the pressures of the pandemic and the constraints which it has imposed, as well as of course, the undoubted economic impact. So not only is the Jamaican public largely aware of the circumstances as they have changed and evolved, but certainly the members of this honourable chamber must be aware of what our realities have been locally and indeed globally. It is critical to note that during this period of initial postponement, Jamaica, along with the rest of the world, has experienced the third and fourth waves of the pandemic. We are indeed still in our fourth. In July 2021, the contagious Delta and virulent Delta variant began to circulate widely and eventually became dominant. By the end of 2021, the highly mutated and even more contagious and transmissible Omicron variant was in circulation globally, and noting again that this had only been scientifically identified in late November 2021. So as a result, this year, Jamaica has seen record numbers of new daily infections. And by way of example, on January 15, the Ministry of Health and Wellness reported our record high of daily new infections at 1,968 new cases. The positivity rate during this fourth wave has also gone as high as close to 60%. And hospitals, of course, have had to restrict intake to only admittance of emergency cases. The government, through the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development and the Ministry of Health and Wellness, as lead agencies in consultation with public health professionals, the national election machinery, and other stakeholders, has considered all these and other matters with a view to determining whether it was prudent to proceed with an undertaking as massive as a local government election, and the decision was no. Mr. President, it is quite clear that over this past 2 weeks, our numbers of new infections have been going in the right direction. Even with a bit of fluctuation, they have been going in the right direction. And I cannot imagine that there is any member of this chamber who would not celebrate this as a positive development, which we hope will continue. In this context, we must commend the government for the measures that have remained in place as we have sought to balance lives and livelihoods, the limited nightly curfew, discretionary work from home as required for the particular circumstances, limits on gathering, mandatory mask wearing and sanitization, and of course, making vaccines widely available and encouraging their uptake. The measures are working cumulatively to bring our numbers down. The additional capacity placed within the health system has still not avoided its coming under serious pressure. But we give thanks that the government and indeed the health authorities were able to make the requisite preparations so that what could have been much worse has been contained, and indeed our mortality rates are comparatively low. Mr. President, we give thanks in this context to our healthcare workers who, while we are all affected, really have borne the brunt of this pandemic. And we thank them for their continued strength, perseverance, and commitment to the health and well-being of Jamaica. Mr. President, now is therefore not the time to disrupt this downward movement with campaigning and the gathering that it will entail. Achieving the best balance is what we are working for, and that is what we seek to achieve. A local government election encompassing a pre-election day and election day activities would undoubtedly exponentially increase the risk of exposure to COVID-19 by members of the public. Given the increased transmissibility of the Omicron variant, which has clearly become more present in Jamaica, and given the high positivity rate, which continues to reflect the pressure on our health facilities, it would be unwise to hold a local government election at this time. It's important to recall that the positivity rate recommended by the WHO, which is the threshold for identifying the pandemic as quote-unquote under control in any particular environment, is 5%. So we always have to ensure that even as we're implementing our best local solutions and our best local balance, that we're guided by these principles, findings, and standards, and guided by the data available by established and authentic authorities globally. So when we postponed the first time, the rate was close to twice the threshold. So it was 8.7%, 3.7 above 5. But now it is between 4 to 6 times as high. I don't have the number for yesterday, but this week it has trended in the high 20s, close to 30. Mr. President, a local government election will also undoubtedly demand significant resources, which are better at this time spent on pandemic-related efforts. The government allocated an additional $5.3 billion to the CARE program during the months of November and December 2021 to cushion the impact of the pandemic on the most vulnerable in a targeted intervention. We have been putting resources in the hands of people who need it most, that is to households on PATH, to NIS pensioners, to persons on PAYE who earn less than or equal to $15,000 a week, to self-employed persons whose statutory income is less than or equal to $60,000 per month, to unemployed persons who remain out of work and who lost their jobs as a result of COVID subsequent to March 10, 2020, and of course through the social pension program to those persons 75 years and older. Not least of all for consideration, Mr. President, is the impact that a local government election would have on our schools with the recent decision to allow for face-to-face learning. Again, it would not be prudent to hold the elections at this time, given the possible disruptions, and noting that many schools operate as polling divisions and counting centres. Just at this point in time, it just does not seem to be the best approach in the interest of Jamaica. So, Mr. President, we note, of course, that Jamaica and indeed the world has to look at how we manage going forward. We have to learn how to live with the virus, but this does not mean throwing wisdom and lessons learned out the window. One of the things we have to learn to manage is life with a continuous level of uncertainty. They have indeed said that that is, the only thing that is certain nowadays. That is that uncertainty has become our inescapable reality, rather. We do our best with science, sourcing authentic information from the most knowledgeable and qualified sources, and recognizing that there was no playbook for this pandemic. We put all the considerations at the table, ensure that consultations take place, and determine the best possible balance in the circumstances as a part of leadership, and that is what we are seeking to do today. So our numbers may well continue to come down, and we do hope that they will, if we continue to follow the protocols and subject to any new disruptive developments, then they should. But when you consider that the Omicron variant was only scientifically identified in late November last year, just about 3 months ago, and you consider what that has meant for the world globally, you understand the wisdom in proceeding with caution. We're aware that some countries are lifting restrictions, noting, however, that they have generally achieved the vaccination of most of their populations, percentages of 75% and upwards, 90%. We also note that there is mention of a new IHU variant which has emerged and is being monitored. When you look back at this last 2 years of the pandemic, see how quickly things can change, and the current circumstances in which we find ourselves as a people, the stress persons are under, the economic challenges, even as we see positive signs, the need for caution cannot be lost on any well-thinking person. We therefore feel quite confident that a postponement of the local government elections for an additional year is the best decision for Jamaica and Jamaicans at this time. Mr. President, as indicated at the start of this presentation, the provisions relating to local government elections are provided for in the 8th schedule of the Representation of the People's Act, as amended by the Local Governance Act 2016. It provides for 1, a general election to elect members to serve on the respective councils of municipal corporations must be held in each municipal corporation within 90 days of the 4th anniversary of the last general election. The general election of mayors of city municipalities must be in each city municipality within 90 days of the 4th anniversary of the last general election, and that these elections must be held on the same day. So the postponement of the local government general elections for an additional year, therefore requires the bill before us to amend this 8th schedule. So the bill before us, and I just do the very briefest of clause by clause. Clause 1 refers to the short title of this bill, and Clause 2 provides for the temporary modification of the Representation of the People Act, allowing for the continuation of the period during which local government elections can be held. Specifically, that this period, this extended period, would come into force on February 28, 2022, and end on February 28, 2023. As was the case previously, this is facilitated by amending paragraph 4, subparagraph 7 of the 8th schedule of the ROPA. And in the circumstances, Mr. President, I commend this bill to this Honourable Senate and look forward to the contributions to the debate. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Senator Brown.
Thank you, President. For the second time during the tenure of this government, they are moving to postpone the local government elections. A postponement, this time like the first time, was on a temporary basis. But as those of us in the workplace know, temporary can become permanent. You're temporarily employed for 10 years, 20 years. So I'm cagey about putting too much store in the term temporary in the legislation. And I do this, President, against a background where in opposition, the party that forms government now declare that they are for fixed election date. They promise the people of the country that within 100 days of becoming government, they would implement legislation to enshrine fixed election date. They were unhappy in the past when local government election was postponed and postponed and postponed. They were unhappy. They were unhappy when Prime Minister could call a general election at any time. So they came up with the great idea, Senator Webby, of a fixed election date. Hang their hat on the cross that they are for fixed election date. But then, when they become government, they're no longer for fixed election date. They call a general election within 4 years. They don't wait the 5 years the Constitution gave them because they no longer believed in fixed election date. Once they had the pen in their hand, Damien, they could use the pen to set the election date whenever it suits them. As part of the agitation against constant postponement of local government elections, the then PNP government moved to change the law in respect to fixed election, in respect to local government election, to set a fixed period, not a fixed date, but a fixed period to bring some certainty to the tenure of parish councillors and councillors in the municipalities and to mayors. So an effort was made as a compromise to the cry of the JLP opposition to move at least the local government to a fixed period. This government, as I say, have chosen not once, but twice, and we can't predict the future. But we never know how many more times they will seek to temporarily postpone the election, moving it from the fixed period for elections. The argument being advanced is that it's COVID, why they can't call the elections. You may be able to sell coal to the people in Newcastle, but you can't sell me that COVID is the reason for putting it off. I don't buy that. Why I don't buy it? Because in 2020, long before the period of the government expired, in the first wave of COVID, they called a general election. They were up and down in motorcades. They were up and down in public meetings. They called the elections within COVID. And some would say that sounds hypocritical to now argue that it's COVID why you're postponing the local government election. And I share the views of those who say it is hypocritical. Is Jamaica the only country in the world with a desire to have elections? Or a demand by its laws to have elections? No. In 2020 November, a fixed election date required that an election be held on the 3rd of November in the United States of America. It was held. And yes, the loser tried to steal it, but it was held. Where's Arbin? Arbin not here today. But it was held. Just in January this year, our sister country Barbados, after the American minister outbreak, called an election and retained the 30 seats that Prime Minister Mia Mottley was defending. Barbados called an election in the same period here. St. Lucia called an election. Trinidad called a local government election in the same period. So this idea that this COVID stopping election, in fact, when Barbados called their election, the data showed that around 9 countries had called the election during this COVID period. So COVID I don't buy. Face-to-face school would be damaged by 1 day of election. I don't buy that either. Because 1 day rain in St. Mary, lick out all schools, and the world don't come to an end. 1 day elections. Don't use face-to-face. It's scandalous to use our children to defend the government hypocrisy on election. Scandalous to use our children. The schools is not the problem. And then, when they realize the school can't, that argument is not catching on, they say, oh, it's our 60th year of independence, our Diamond Jubilee, and so we don't want to create division in the Diamond Jubilee. When you hear so many excuses being advanced, you know that's not the real reason for the postponement. This is but an excuse being advanced. The reality, Mr. President, is that the wicket is sticky. The wicket is sticky. Not good for batting. Not good for batting. It's not a wise thing to go. It's not a wise thing to go bat when the price of chicken, when the price of chicken is going up. It's not a good time to go bat when the price of flour. But Barbados call election. St. Lucia call election. America call election. It is not a good time to bat when when the price of bread, flour, which will push bread, juke them with bulla price, juke them with bun price, juke them with biscuit price. And Mr. President, even the little man who doing fritters, the flour price going to go up. So you can't call the elections. Because the flour, the bulla, the bread, the bun, the chicken, the cement, it's a bad time to go to the wicket. And that's the real reason why this government is afraid to call elections. And somebody explained to me, President, they said they understand the trepidation of the government. They understand the fear of the government in not wanting to have a local government election. They said to me, in 1986, the government then had not 49 seats in the parliament. They had 60 seats. They appointed all the senators. 60 seats, not 49. And they called the local government elections. And they lost. And that led up to the 1989 general election, which was called almost when the time ran out for elections to be called. Because they don't believe in fixed term election. They believe in expediency. And that local government election of 86, in understanding your trepidation, led to 18 years of the JLP being in the wilderness. So who would want to call a local government election and the sticky wicket that I have outlined? Who would want to call such an election? No. Not this government. This government rather pick a fight with Chief Curry over sovereignty. This government knows that not only elections are being promised a temporary postponement, they know the people of Jamaica recall that they promised 5 in 4. And we need us to the 4, nor the 5. So the promises of this government for a 1-year postponement can't be taken seriously. Not when they promise 5 in 4 and fail to deliver. Not when they promise, Mr. President, for the population to sleep, go to bed, and sleep with the windows and doors open. And wake up alive, wake up in the morning, and still be alive. This government failure and crime is so bad that people are saying with 130 odd murders in the month of January, it's one of the highest in the last almost a decade for the month of January. So when it comes to fighting crime, the wicked sticky, this government has failed, and therefore they can't call the local government election when due. When it comes to prosperity that they promise the people, it is poverty people are seeing. Poverty. Don't tell me about unemployment when we know the reason for that is more people are outside the labor force. And if you have any doubt about that, depending on where you live, your gate get knocked. People begging for little food regularly. So it's poverty, not prosperity, that they have delivered. So they can't call the local government election because poverty has replaced the hope and the dream of prosperity. This government promised to fix the bank fees in 2018. To fix the bank fees when Fitzjackson bill was debated. They said we'll fix it by June 2018. And last week I was told, don't talk about the bank fees. You'll have another time to talk about it. I know. And you're afraid to call the local government because you never fix the bank fees. Sticky wicket. Sticky wicket. Sticky wicket. And so, Mr. President, I could go through, but the other who will speak to show how sticky this wicket is. This is such a sticky wicket for the government that they conjure COVID, but COVID wasn't a stopper in 2020. COVID wasn't a stopper along the way. Children out of school for a day wasn't a stopper. Diamond Jubilee come on once every 60 years. And the Prime Minister did say him not going to do anything that divide the nation. So I'm not calling local government election. So COVID may convince those of you in the 13. It may convince those of you in the 49. But 13 and 49 is not all that makes up Jamaica. As Norman Manley once said, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. I knew I was going to get a response from you. I knew I was going to get a response from you. But certainly
what you should have said is, as Norman Manley repeated.
I know I was going to get that from you, and I take that. Norman Manley repeated a wise thing, and I am repeating what they say. You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. So you can run, but you can't hide. At some point, you have to call the elections, whether the general or the local. I take no comfort from demonstration from JLP people in St. Thomas about their St. Thomas first, about their MP. I take no comfort from what happened in Northeast St. Anne's, of people come demonstrating against the JLP MP. At least your own people are saying to you, the prosperity is not here. And they ask, I want to ask, as one of the placards asked yesterday, Andrew, why you postponing the election? Andrew, why you do it? Andrew, why you do it? And so, while the government has the majority here to impose the postponement, I do not accept the arguments advanced. Minister, you and I agree that the healthcare workers are deserving of our support. They deserve the payment that they must get for working during COVID. They deserve all that are benefit. They deserve the raise of pay. And another reason why the wicket is so sticky, Mr. President, as I close, is that your government promised to increase minimum wage. And that minimum wage was last increased in 2018. 4 years sent again. 4 years without an increase. Not going to look good. Sticky wicket. So you're going to go into an election when you're not giving the people facing the high cost of living an increase in the minimum wage. Sticky wicket. And that's your real problem, the sticky wicket. But you know what is bad, Santa Gill? Your government has now incentivized people in the private sector to say, scrap minimum wage by legislation. Leave it to demand and supply. Santa Gill, stand up and tell them, you and I, not into that. We're not into that. Tell them this idea about leaving minimum wage, as the Chamber of Commerce has reported to have said, to demand and supply, is not acceptable. Not acceptable to Michael Manley. Not acceptable to you,
Senator
Sheriff.
Brown, come. You jump off for the...
No, I'm not jumping
No,
off.
yeah, man. Hold on a little bit.
Your government batting on sticky wicket. and one of it is not increasing the minimum wage.
You said that 10 times, so you are being...
And I want to say it 11 times.
So
your government batting and sticking
So you are
with it.
being repetitive. So move on, please.
I am done not moving on. I am done because this government...
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
I'm done not moving on. This government approach to the people of Jamaica. This government approach to the people of Jamaica is one in which we cannot trust the words of the government. We cannot trust their arguments. And we are clear that the reason being advanced here is but an excuse for the fact that they are batting and sticky wicket and they can't play to the bowling of the people. May it please you, Mr. President, this is almost a scam.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Senator Williams.
Morning, Mr. President. I don't intend to be very long, Mr. President, because I believe that the arguments are quite clear. And leader, the Honorable Minister, has itemized all the arguments to be made postponement of the local government elections. I would just want to say that postponement of local government elections are not unusual. Not unusual. And I believe our Senator colleague, Lambert Brown, would be quite aware of that. But what is unusual is the times we're living in. So the postponement of local government elections, that is not unusual. As a matter of fact, when the PNP government postponed the local government elections for, I believe, approximately 8 years, the argument was, you could ask Senator Brown, the argument was local government reform. That was the argument. You could go and check. The argument was we are postponing because we are going through a period of local government reform and we want to finish the reform process before we have local government elections. Then again, it was postponed not too long ago. And the argument was, I would put it in my words, we wanted to fuel the pipeline. We wanted to do some things that would help the economy, help the citizens, and we didn't believe that at this time that a local government election was necessary. So the point is we have had postponement of local government elections. I would say, and I would put the argument forward, that if you ever had a reason to postpone local government elections, this would be the reason. Not the local government reform and not the fueling of the economy. Good reasons, and I wouldn't challenge them, but I would say the public health risk and putting our country in a public health, potentially a public health crisis, is serious business. And to postpone an election for this purpose is quite appropriate and responsible. You refer to November 2020. We won the September 2020 election in, I would recall, a landslide, a massive victory. Now, so you move from September to November. Why would you postpone an election in November 2020 if all you were concerned about was, yes, political expediency? Why would you postpone an election in November 2020? Come on. You would not, a political party that is bent on victory, and political advantage would never postpone an election in November 2020. Never. But we did. We did. So in November 2020, it was okay for us to postpone it. But now we're postponing because the circumstances are similar, and I would say even worse now. And we are postponing. But now, we are postponing for political expedience, but we weren't doing it in November. The argument I'm making, the fact that we postponed in November 2020, and the circumstances are similar, the environment is the same or even worse, I would say it's very difficult for you to make the argument that we're doing so now because of political expedience. I couldn't reach from there to here and use political expedience. As a matter of fact, to speak truthfully, it would be very good if we were talking about political party interest. It would be very good to go to an election now. So I would dismiss that point about political expedience, because if you're going to use political expedience now, why wouldn't you use it in November 2020? So the government has the moral authority to defend this point because the government postponed an election in November 2020 when it had a landslide victory. And I'm pretty sure you at the time, you figured that if we had gone to an election, you would have been wiped out. I know Senator Crawford is looking at say, true. So the other point I want to make, because there are some points that I would have made, but I believe that the leader has gone through that properly. And I think it's very clear. But the other point I want to make is that the municipalities are the local boards of health. Don't forget that. It would be difficult for the local boards of health to be taking a decision that would put the public at risk, that would create a public health risk. And potentially put the country in a public health crisis. I don't see how the local board of health could do that. So the local board of health has to take the public health seriously. And we all know, having an election now, there are many risks to an election, public health risk. And so it is, I would say, quite responsible and quite appropriate to postpone the local government elections. The other point I would want to make is, just look at what is happening. Our children, families and children, have had to readjust and get themselves in almost a new rhythm of learning. It has been a stressful time for our children, and they are still going through the stress of readjusting in terms of the method of learning. We have had online classes. Not all children have adjusted to online classes. There are some children who really don't have access, who are having difficulties also in terms of accessing online classes. So our families and our children are going through a period of stress. Would we want to take a decision to exacerbate that, or to heighten the stress that the children and the families are going through? I would say that would be highly irresponsible. Highly irresponsible. And so when you look at the health system itself, and remember I'm talking about in the context also of the parish councils being the local boards of health. If you look at the health system, the bed capacity is approximately 700. In January, there were about over 800 persons admitted in hospitals. We are down to about 50%. There are below 420 something in terms of persons hospitalized. We have to be careful that we don't take a decision that would put the health system at risk or put the stress on the health system. Remember now, the health system is not just about bed capacity. It's also about the availability of medicines, oxygen, the staff. So all of that feeds into the health system and the quality of care we get in the hospital. We can't take decisions that's going to put at risk the quality of care given to persons who are admitted in hospital. And a decision to have an election could also result in far greater numbers of persons needing to be hospitalized, which would put the hospital system or the health system under immense stress, and which would mean that you would impact the quality of care that is given to persons. And it's just reasonable. If you don't have the adequate staff in place, adequate medicines, to deal with greater numbers of persons being admitted in the hospital system, then the quality of care is going to be affected. So I would say a decision to have an election at this time would also result, or could possibly result in that. I would say would result in that. The Barbados case was mentioned as a case. But remember, the vaccination rate in Barbados is about 51%. What the vaccination rate in Jamaica is like, 21%? So there's a big difference there. There is also, don't forget that there was a spike in Barbados also after the elections. So there was a spike. I believe it moved from 68 to about 699 cases per day. So the Barbados case that Senator Brown is depending on, that case is also a good reason to show that, look here, elections bring spikes. And Jamaica at this time, well, I would say we would not want to take a decision that's going to put our entire system under stress, especially in a context where we have had a history, to speak frankly and factually, of postponement of elections. And my argument is the postponement of local government elections would be highly responsible and the appropriate thing to do in the context of public health risk. I would want to finish by encouraging the vaccination drive. I would want to finish by encouraging that. And I just want, so if we look at the number hospitalized, the latest numbers I saw in terms of the vaccination status of persons hospitalized, roughly 87% of the persons who are hospitalized are unvaccinated. About 2% or thereabout are fully vaccinated, and about 11% partially vaccinated. So if you look at just this figure alone, it would suggest that you would want to vaccinate your population. You would want to. So I take this opportunity to use this platform to encourage the vaccination drive, because the vaccination drive, if we're looking at the figures, vaccinations do matter. I would also want to say the figure is about similar in terms of vaccination status from deaths from COVID-related deaths. There it is about 98% unvaccinated. And so I would use this platform to encourage the government to continue the vaccination drives. And because that would also help us in terms of the decisions we take and how soon we return to as normal as we can get. With that, I say that I think the arguments are quite clear. I think the reasons are clear, reasonable, and I don't see any reason why anyone would want to not support the postponement of the local government elections. Thank you very much.
Senator Crawford, you want the
Yes, sir.
lectern?
Just fix it up for me, sir.
Senator, thank you, Senator Williams.
Yes, yes.
You want the lectern?
Yes, please, sir. Hide my belly from the TV. Support, some support. Yes, prosperity. It's reaching.
Thank you very much, Senator Crawford.
Thank you. I need a protection, Mr. President. They're besmirching the protein and fat content of goat meat. I need your protection. But, Mr. President, one can understand why members within the society, including Senator Lambert Brown and others, would question the truthfulness of the reasons presented by the government. Before I delve further into it, I'd like to welcome them onto the side of what was called well-thinking Jamaicans. Because there was a time, coming into August of 2020, that persons like myself were in the wilderness crying that no election should be called. And the government at the time was very adamant, in spite of COVID, that they had to act in a politically expedient way. Indeed, I'm not seeing the mayor from Kingston. He has stepped out for a minute, but Senator Williams made an excellent point. It caught me off guard for a little bit. He said, why would we postpone in November when it was expedient to call it? And by extension, now, it should not be any different. And I'm going to turn that question to say, why is COVID the reason now, when in September, it was very, very different? Because all the realities that were outlined for today were realities that existed, and in many cases, to higher levels, greater uncertainty in 2020. And so what we are faced with is that the government has not participated in the habit of truth. And because they have not participated in the habit of truth, then all their statements are by extension questioned. I can't look at you when I say these things. But the government has not participated in the habit of truth. Let's look at some very simple example. Most recently, the government, in an effort to be politically expedient, has tried to convince themselves and the public that the opposition is in somehow cahoots and support of criminal activity by not supporting the state of emergency. I put it to you that there's no member of the government side who knows anything about any member of the opposition side that truly believes that. Yet you continue, because you perceive that there's political benefit, to repeat it, in spite of the statements that were made. So much so that the Prime Minister indicated it in a church. When the Prime Minister knows that there can be no true reason and no true basis of that statement. Another example of the government not being in the habit of truth is that was stated just here today. The leader of government business suggested that government actions have contributed greatly to the reductions in COVID. But Senator Brown, as a man of science yourself, if no new intervention was created when the spike started, how can the intervention be suggested to be the reason when the spike is abated? The same rules of curfew were there when the spike started. The same rules of mask were there when the spike started. The same rules of the social distancing were there when the spike started. In fact, there has been a reversal of something. A reversal. Children are now going to school. So therefore, when you don't participate in the habit of truth, all your statements will be questioned. And so when Senator Williams suggests that the local government has a duty of care, is that duty of care greater than the Prime Minister's duty of care to ensure that he does not take steps that expose the public to greater threats under COVID-19? Because the Prime Minister in 2020 had total responsibility. And I would suggest ultimate duty. In fact, the Prime Minister suggests that he has ultimate duty for the protection of the people, both under the Constitution and under the law. Only he alone, he has stated. I'll give you another example where they do not practice in the habit of truth. And Senator Williams spoke to it. He said that we should get vaccinated. And I'm in agreement, no question there. But the Prime Minister said that the vaccination tour is effective. Now, when you look on with all knowledge and facts that it is not effective, I'm not saying that he shouldn't tour. He can tour if he wants to tour. But effectiveness is simply yay or nay. With the numbers quoted by Senator Williams, the numbers known by the entire society, it has not been effective. But out of experience, out of not participating in the habit of truth, I am exposing your habit of lies. I am exposing your habit of lies. I hear the good senator suggest that there was a spike in Barbados after the election, but we don't have to go far because there was a spike in Jamaica as well after the election. So why we jump on plane and gone all over the place? There was a spike in Jamaica, but at that time, it wasn't blamed on the election. It was blamed on dancehall. It was blamed on indisciplined community, citizens not doing what they were supposed to do, and the election was of no moment. Yes. And vaccination was, well, we never ever had vaccines, much less vaccination. It was 0.00%. The last gas I remember is a gas riot led by that party. You're in a habit of lies. The last gas is a gas riot. All I'm saying is that I have been consistent and constant, as is the truth. In August 2020, my opinions were the same. I cannot say to you that your opinion was the same in August 2020. I cannot say to the leader of government business that her argument was the same. I cannot say to the mayor of Kingston that his argument was the same. Nor can I say about the Prime Minister of Jamaica that his argument was the same. You switched in November and my argument was the same. And so I'm saying to you that, well, the good thing is that when you have less information, you have more risk, and by extension, you should not act. So when you were acting at that time on less information, it was improper. Don't say anything. Yeah, meet and teach today, it's that time yet. Listen up. What I'm saying is simply this. I will ask for the answer of today's deliberations. Because unless the circumstances change, unless all the arguments put forward no longer exist, one would expect that there will be no calling of any elections. unless our children no longer need to be protected and to go to school, unless the numbers of beds are no longer under threat, 700, and unless the vaccination rate increase exponentially, unless we are no longer encouraged by science to distance, I would expect that I don't hear in March or April that it is now expedient and we have to live with COVID. Because that would prove that there is no habit of truth. I support, but I still remain wary that political expedience is taking great advantage in the governance of our society. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Crawford. Senator Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have a very short bill before us, and you know, when I saw it, I was of the view that we would not have heard so much commentary from the across the aisle that would have put all the spins that Senator Brown has put to this debate, and that it would have been one that would have had a very short debate, commentary on. But obviously that is not the case. But you know, the comments made by Senator Brown seem to have taken on, in fact I thought I was hearing comments that would be related to what we would have as a parliamentary election type of situation. But we all know in Jamaica, when you have local government elections, people don't tend to vote on those issues. They vote on local issues. Primarily they do. In fact, you will ask persons who vote in a local government election, they tell you that they are die-hard PNP or JLP, but because of what is happening locally, within their local, that they will vote the other way. Local issues. And you know, when you look on the administration of the local authorities across Jamaica, primarily which are under the leadership, stewardship of persons from the Jamaica Labour Party, we have not had issues that would impact persons wanting to vote against them. But you go over into Manchester, and we have a $400 million scandal. You would want to get rid of that leadership. You go into Hanover, where the Integrity Commission has had to intervene, and in fact persons had to leave office. You would want to remove that stewardship. And in Westmoreland, you know, just last week, where the Honorable Minister of Local Government, Desmond Mackenzie, who is providing support to the municipal corporation under the stewardship of the People's National Party, in respect to improving a market for the benefit of the people in Westmoreland. But the mayor and a former member of parliament from that side would have made arrangements in respect to the safe use of land that was to develop the market. Scandalous type of activities that affect the local issues. You wouldn't want that leadership to be there. We hear the comment about it being politically expedient. I think our mayor has addressed that. But you know, Mr. President, I have heard whispers to say that if you don't want to have a tumultuous September or a September to remember, then I thought you would have supported the bill without much debate. Senator Brown. Because what would have occurred if the elections were held in November of 2020, I guarantee you that if it were held even today, then you would have not just 4 municipalities, but you would have none. If it were held in 2020, you would have had none. When you look on how the vote turned out in September of 2020. And as I said, if you had it today, September would be a September to remember. Well, they know what happens in September. Mr. President, the postponement in the polls, obviously is something that is regretted. The Honourable Minister Desmond McKenzie has said so. But it is something that is necessary in the context of the circumstances existing in Jamaica at this moment. And the necessity is set out clearly in the memorandum of the objects and reasons. And they are therefore all to see. The postponement is necessary due to the impact of the coronavirus 2019 on the Jamaican society and the economy, and increased risk of exposure by the Jamaican electorate to the coronavirus 19. Mr. President, Jamaica is currently experiencing a 4th wave of the pandemic, and the rates of infections have increased in recent times, especially the arrival to our shores of the Omicron variant of the virus. And we have seen where the positivity rate has gone up from what it was even when I made my contribution to the State of the Nation recently. It has gone up, sometimes getting to as high as 60%. And we know that infections come with increased hospitalizations and deaths. And we have also seen an increase in those areas. So, Mr. President, to proceed into an election with the possibility of persons moving around and interfacing and intermingling with others would likely see an explosion of cases exceeding our capacity to manage. In the circumstance and having reference to our recent history, where there were a high number of cases and deaths and breaches in the bed capacity and ability to provide needed health care, including oxygen, it is my opinion that this administration has taken the responsible position and have put this bill for the postponement of the elections. So, President, the focus of the government, the people, and the resources should be on the recovery effort. And this administration must be applauded for the manner in which it continues to handle the affairs of the country through these trying times. Yes. And Mr. President, when you look at it from a macro scale, our international credit rating has remained positive. That was spoken about extensively during the State of the Nation. Senator Webby, in his closing, made significant reference to that. The stock market, Mr. President, continues to perform creditably, and the gross international reserves remain healthy. So, Mr. President, Jamaicans are, pardon me? Jamaicans are feeling confident.
1 minute.
Yes, sir.
Senators Bunting and Brown are asking what
no,
is your 1 minute. 1 minute, please. Senator Brown and Bunting are asking about the relevance. I can explain. He's discussing the wicket.
That sound like a googly.
But you know, yes, but the wicket is good, so it obviously is not political expediency. You know, so Unemployment, Mr. President, continues in a downward trajectory. Job opportunities are increasing. So, in respect to speaking about political expediency, I cannot accept the argument put forward by Senator Brown. And what really is a concern is about the health of the nation, the health of the people of this country. And when you look in other countries, countries that have greater capacity than Jamaica, they have also postponed local elections. Elections for local councils have been postponed. Local authority mayors, metro mayors, and even the local officials postponed in the United Kingdom, right across the United Kingdom. Elections have been postponed locally because of the coronavirus situation that exists. They have postponed them to May of 2022, and they say that it is still under review. And what they have the potential to do, which we don't, and I heard Senator Brown make reference to even the elections being held in the United States during a period of coronavirus, is that they are able to have a lot of votes going in by post. We don't have that ability in respect to votes by post. So they can reduce the possibility, and I believe in the United States it was the highest amount of votes that went in by post in the circumstances that existed there. As I said, we do not have that opportunity in order to do improvements. Mr. President, as we got this bill to look at and today to debate it, I recall that this administration had brought a bill to this Parliament regarding the holding of local government elections and parliamentary elections at the same time. And in fact, it was a situation which arose out of a recommendation made in 2015 by the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, when they recommended, at that time, legislative changes to facilitate the possibility to hold local government and parliamentary elections on the same day. Mr. President, I am aware that some persons were of the view that that should have happened from 2020, and I suppose if it did, we would not be having this debate today. And as I said, that election in September of 2020 has caused the adjustment in this chamber, so that you have 2 rows over there, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows on this side. So you would know what would have happened if both were held at the same time. So, President, that proposal is one that speaks to a cost-saving measure. And only recently I saw in the media the Electoral Office of Jamaica requesting $1 billion to prepare for local government elections. At the time when we had the debate, the cost was somewhere in the region of $750 million per election, whether it is parliamentary or local government. So in a small space of time, a short space of time, we have seen an increase in respect to the cost of elections by over $250 million. So, President, I do not sit on the executive. And so the comment that I make is my personal view, my personal opinion. And I stand to be heavily criticized for it. But I want to put on the table that we should focus, as I said earlier, on the recovery effort. We should focus to ensure that we do not put the health of the Jamaican citizens at risk. And if it needs be that we have to have a postponement and have local and general elections at the same time, at some time in the future, then it is something that we have to look at in a serious way. we must have mature and objective discussions with the opposition in arriving at a position which is best in the context of this pandemic. Mr. President, I feel sure that the Jamaican public would support a postponement to facilitate, at the appropriate time, a 2-in-1 election, whether it is 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road, whilst the resources be spent in overcoming the ravages of the pandemic and providing a better quality of life for the vulnerable, particularly the children who need tablets, the aged, and the disabled. Mr. President, it is my view that moving to a 2-in-1 election will spur greater voter participation and will reflect better on our democracy. Whilst I say that, I'm aware that there may be concerns that there are some divisions without local government representatives at this time, arising from deaths. In one case of which I am aware, election victory, causing the movement of the councillor to a member of parliament. And in the case of at least 2 of them in St. James, they walked off the job and abandoned the people. Yes. No, I did not cause a breach of the local governance rules. They walked off the job by failing to attend the required amount of meetings that is stipulated in the Local Governance Act, which was passed under the administration of the People's National Party. And the People's National Party local government representatives, as far as I'm concerned, abandoned their position. Mr. President, in respect to those, I would encourage the chairmen, mayors of those municipalities to ensure that the PDCs, the CBOs, are strengthened and that they can represent the voice of the people until such elections are held. Mr. President, gone are the days when only the political representative can be the voice of the people. There are structures that are spoken about in the Local Governance Act that needs to be strengthened and improved in order for them to provide a voice for the people. Mr. President, in closing, Mr. Mackenzie, Minister of Local Government, has said in clear terms that this administration is committed to the system of local government. And we don't only speak it, we show it in action. And we have shown it in action with what has been implemented under this minister, where councillors have been given personal assistance who are able to assist in record keeping, submission of information to facilitate the work of the council. The Minister of Local Government, Desmond Mackenzie, has done that. Commitment to the local government system. Mr. President, the Building Act, which allows for the municipal corporations to carry out their mandate as a local planning authority, was passed by this administration. We are committed to the local government system. The Streetlight Bill, which was left unattended under a previous administration of over $7 billion, was cleared by this administration. What that does, it facilitates councillors, the municipal corporations, to speak in a strong voice to the Jamaica Public Service to ensure that where repairs are to be done, repairs are done. That shows a commitment, Mr. President, to the system of local government. This administration is of that view. This administration has improved the facilities in parishes, in locations that are dominated by the People's National Party representatives. In Westmoreland, they now have a new municipal building, far improved from the broken down type of structure that was left there. A new municipal corporation building was opened under this administration in Westmoreland. Similarly, in Portmore, Municipal Corporation now has a new building. So when you look at what has been done by this administration, it is not only about talk. We are committed. And so the comments that I have heard from Senator Brown that would want to give the impression that this administration is not committed to the system of local government is not accurate. The comments about sticky wicket has no foundation. And it is where you have municipal corporations under the control of the People's National Party that I think you would have tremendous difficulty in retaining because of the number of scandals that have emanated from those councils. And you make the relationship or you compare them, you don't find that situation arising in corporations that are under the stewardship of the Jamaica Labour Party. Mr. President, I support this bill for all the reasons that are stated and for more. And in respect to the holding of local government elections, I would say also stand firmly behind this. If it is that there needs to be further postponement in order for us to do cost saving and to have a 2-in-1, then so be it too, Mr. President. If it so pleases you, those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Senator Sinclair. Senator Scott Motley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to commend my colleague, Government Senator, on what he has demonstrated as obvious preparedness for the local government election. That was indeed a very powerful political presentation. In fact, as he spoke, I had to revisit the Memorandum of Objects and Reasons, because what I was hearing was that perhaps the postponement was about having 2 elections in one. And I had to look at it again to remind myself that what we were speaking about was the impact of SARS-CoV-2, called coronavirus COVID-19, on the Jamaican society and economy, and the increased risk of exposure by the Jamaican electorate to COVID. Indeed, listening to my learned colleague, I thought it was such an exceptional case against the Memorandum of Objects, because he so lauded the government's achievements, including the stability to the economy, that I wondered if we were really in the right debate. There is, let me make it clear from my perspective, and I speak on my own behalf now. I have no objection to the postponement of the local government elections, but I do have an objection to how the argument is being posed. I recall very clearly how it was that a sense of great panic was created when we had the first case of SARS-CoV-19 in Jamaica. I recall that even in my own office, we responded to the government, established work from home rules, closed the office to protect the public, to protect the clients. Schools were closed. Lockdowns were imposed. Requirements still on the DRMA were put into place to prevent people from just being able to come into the island. Applications had to be made for you to return. Crews or workers on cruise ships were prevented from coming home. and the government was being praised for the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government chose to call a general election in the midst of all that, with 1 year constitutionally left to go, and another 3 months if so required. There was nobody who could prevail on them that in the interest of protecting the people of Jamaica and the public, they should not hold that general election. And what Senator Delroy Williams has said about November 2020, you could have gone ahead. You could have gone ahead. Oh yes, you could have gone ahead. The consequences might have been grave if you had gone ahead. But the question I am now asking is, how can you have done that then and now in this environment say that you're attempting to protect the public? Because indeed, in August 2020, we had no vaccines available. There was no protection which was being afforded to the public. There were motorcades all over the island, gatherings in celebration of the persons who held political prominence in our country. And if that was not irresponsible, I don't know what was. But suddenly now, Senator Sinclair, this government has become so concerned about people and so caring and so protective of public health. And let me tell you, in the circumstances, it's in circumstances where we have increased the hours that people can be, how do I put it? So curfew now is from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock, moving from 6 to 8, then 8 to 10. There are no more lockdown days. You know, the lockdown days that most of us who are obliged and stayed in our house, even if we were political persons exempt, we decided we were going to set an example. We stay home, so nobody can say that them see us on the road. Except at our hotel. We had restrictions on gatherings. A minimum amount, I think it was 15 people who could attend a wedding. Now it can go up to 100. We still have the restrictions on funerals, which I don't understand. It's not logical to me. But I realize that there's very little which is logical about this situation. Because even with, you can go to Caymanas Park as you like. There's been no restriction imposed on that. But not even vaccinated people are allowed to go to a football match. The little Premier League football match where the poor people, the poor young men and women who we are trying to help, and those alienated youths, because I don't like the word unattached, those alienated youths, alienated by the society, who get a chance to go and play some ball and make them name through football, they can't get a chance to play to an audience. It don't make any sense. It does not make any sense what the government does. And now suddenly, in a situation where persons can move freely around, in a situation where the Prime Minister has made it absolutely clear, argument done manner, we are not going to have any lockdowns in Jamaica. In other words, we are going to live with COVID. And a lot of us have recognized that we are going to live with COVID. And because we are going to live with COVID, we have started back face-to-face for our children. That's part of what we have done to make the appropriate adjustments. We have said that the government has said that the work from home rule for persons 60 and over no longer applies. So in this context, what we have seen is an easing of all the restrictions. There are many people who are anticipating that when these restrictions, these DRMA orders come to an end February 10th, we are going to see even more freeing up. Do I personally think it's a good thing? Yes, I do. I am not critical of the government for freeing it, for easing the restrictions. I don't think that they have really served a very useful purpose. I believe that the social distancing, the wearing of the mask, the sanitizing of the hands has done more for us than sending us home at 9 o'clock. Because the people who go home at 9 o'clock are the people obeying the rules. And the people who are still on the road at 1 o'clock, they don't wear any masks. So you're creating, it's almost like you're not really examining the true situation which is existing. So I agree. I agree with the Prime Minister's argument done. No more lockdowns. And that is why I am battling with the justification which is being proffered for the year postponement, what is called the temporary, to temporarily modify the representation of the People's Act in order to postpone the holding of the election. Because it doesn't fit in with what the government is saying. So you're sending such mixed signals. On the one hand, you're saying, no lockdown, open up, get used to it, go back to school, we're going to function. And on the other hand, you're bringing a bill here that says, no, we're so worried about the people, we can't have elections. This is in the context, you know, of 37% of the people voting in the general election. And Senator Sinclair, a notorious fact that the voting pattern in local government elections is lower. A notorious fact. So, Mr. President, maybe Senator Sinclair has indicated what is the real intention. Maybe Senator Sinclair has indicated what is the real intention. Because, are you finished? Okay, so let make the point and then I will resume. Okay, thank you. So, maybe there is an idea of having two elections in one. And elections are costly things. Certainly, it appears that the government is supremely confident that should they go to an election now, they'll win everything. There is the state of confidence in which the government finds itself, the state of confidence in which the government finds itself can only be thwarted by the electorate. And one thing I can tell you, electorates are remarkably unpredictable. Sometimes they vote people in, and sometimes they vote people out. They have two reasons for going to the poll. Their dissatisfaction with who is in to vote them out, or in other circumstances because they wish a change. The two of them can happen. And I have learned that persons who are given power by virtue of somebody else's whims ought to be very careful how they gloat about it. So, Mr. President, I say this. Before I close, Mr. President, may I commend the Minister of Health in commissioning all those field hospitals and increasing the capacity of beds which we have. Because it means then that if we do, any increase in COVID cases has been properly planned for, much like in Barbados. So, Mr. President, I told you I have a budget for the government of Jamaica. So, Mr. President, I rise not to oppose the bill. I rise because I do not believe that even the government could feel that based on their utterances over the last couple of months, this reason is justified. I do not believe that anybody listening could see what is happening generally in the society in relation to COVID-19, and indeed in the world, with all the changes which have been made. Some people, you don't have to get vaccinated to come in the country anymore. You don't have to get tested to come into the country anymore. And the world generally, I'm not saying absolutely, but the world generally has taken a shift because we recognize that this is not going anywhere. And we have to live with it.
If you have COVID and you're a foreigner, you can play football now. But you can't go stay there with my vaccine.
Mr. President, those who say that everything is for the taking, I wish them well, if it pleases you.
Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Senator Campbell Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to give support to this bill, and especially so as a former councillor myself. Local governance is important. There is no doubt about that whatsoever, because it is a critical part of the management and delivery of resources to communities in Jamaica. And there is no one sitting on this side who readily wants there to not be a local government election. This bill is before us because we are in a time which is unlike any other time that we have ever had in modern history. Now, colleagues before me on both sides have acknowledged that COVID is an issue. And it is a highly contagious illness that has wreaked havoc on countries across the globe. This is not something that is specific to Jamaica. But in addition, we have to look back on the history of postponements of local government election. And let me just state clearly, I do not believe that we should consistently postpone local government elections during normal times. Now, if you look at the dates of past local government elections, 1981, then 1986, then 1990, then between 1990 and 1998, it was an 8-year gap when local government election was not called. And then after 1998, it took 5 years for local government election to be called. After 2003, it was 4 years later, and then 5 years later, and then 4 years later. And now we find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic. And leadership. When I was doing my master's, one of the things we placed a lot of emphasis on was leadership. And leadership requires not just intelligence or strength of character, but also specifically emotional intelligence. And what it means is, sometimes, as the head of Edifocal often posts on Twitter, he says, ignore the noise, focus and execute. And that is what this government has been forced to do when there is an opposition that just simply opposes for the sake of opposing. Now, we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel with the fall in the numbers across several categories related to COVID. Deaths are down, hospitalization numbers, positivity rate, etc. Why would a responsible government do anything at this point to threaten this? Why would we? For Jamaicans, for the people in Jamaica who participate in elections, it is almost like a festival. We love it. And this could be a petri dish for COVID to be on the rise again. Now, two members who spoke from the other side referenced Barbados. We must remember that unlike Barbados that called their election in the middle of Omicron, their vaccine rate is much higher than ours. Much higher than ours. It's over 50%. And as such, absolutely does. And you know what matters too? When you have to face several leaders over a short time because the other leader just beat and teach you right, left and center. So yes, leadership matters. So Barbados has a rate of over 50%. You can't compare a country that has a higher vaccine rate to one that has a lower vaccine rate as to why you can call an election during a variant such as Omicron. Now, St. Lucia was also raised as a country in the region that called an election during this. But guess what? It didn't call it during a variant that was as highly contagious as Omicron is. And that does make a difference. But remember, we're talking about the fact that leadership has to ignore the noise, focus, and execute. Now, I just briefly want to, Senator Crawford, you're correct. You have been consistent. And there you're wrong.
Up until that moment, you have always been consistent. And I want to read from the answer the last time in November 27, 2020. I'm going to read what you said. Mr. President, with all fairness, and I have been consistent. And you see, that is what I learned as a child. My father used to tell me the truth is constant and consistent. The truth can't change. I was in the wilderness as one of the very few politicians who constantly said no election should be called, publicly and openly. I said no election should be called because the activities of an election were likely to contribute to everything opposite to that which has been proposed by the Ministry of Health. The question is, why are you not listening to your father today? Why are you not being consistent and saying no election should be called in the middle of the pandemic? Why have you deviated from your father's guidance today? No, in that same sitting of the Senate, Senator Crawford said, he said, and he was referring to Senator Samuda, you are victorious and you are also able to reduce the opposition benches by a half.
but those actions led to COVID deaths increasing by almost 20 times. And Senator Binns, the Hansard is showing, said, shame, shame, shame. Why then are we not today willing to accept? Now, to be very honest, if I sat on the benches where we were recently almost wiped out, and you have a chance to rebuild and to refocus, Senator Webby, I personally would take that time to rebuild instead of just opposing for the sake of opposing. Because if we had come to this parliament, if the Prime Minister had announced an election date, I am willing to wager.
On a point of order, I'm practicing my standing orders.
I am not yielding. And the standing order
No, hello.
No.
Point of order.
Respectfully, Mr. President, the Speaker is misrepresenting what all the opposition persons have said. No opposition person says that they are opposing the postponement of the election.
Thank you, Senator Scott Martin. Not a point of order. Continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
You see, I think that Senator, when
I see that you're listening in Standing Orders Committee.
Senator Scott Motley, when Senator Campbell Rodriguez said she was not going to yield, she was referring to a point of clarification. But this was a point of order. Remember, we went through it this morning.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, but I suspected she was going down where she was going, just saying something for the sake of saying it.
The point of orders can vary depending on who raises them.
But, you know, Mr. President, this is an opportunity for us to do something together. And we know in our hearts, if we were to have a quiet moment without the need for referring to wickets, I don't even understand cricket too well, but it is the best thing for our country at the moment. And if we are to be constant and consistent, like Senator Crawford's fathers advised him to do, we would know that this bill shows leadership of a country at the level at which it should be. Ignore the noise, focus, and execute that which is necessary for our country. And Senator Sinclair raised a point. He said, is it that maybe the best thing is for there to be his opinion, not the party's opinion, not the government's opinion, but his own opinion. And it is also my personal, individual opinion that maybe this is something we need to consider, where both elections should be held together. Because the reality is, Senator Crawford, that there are several local governance issues which may be on the horizon that need to be fixed. Why not use the opportunity to fix a system that could be better? So, Mr. President, it's a short bill, so I won't speak much more on it. But I will say sometimes when one is handed a gold spoon, they should simply put it in their mouths and be quiet, because it is not nice. I have lost an election and I know losing is not nice. So, to lose on a national scale over and over, take the gold spoon and put it in your mouth and be quiet and just work with it and accept the gift horse, if it pleases you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Campbell Rodriguez. Senator Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just wanted to add some brief remarks on this bill that we have before us. And I want to start off by adding just a bit of clarification and making it abundantly clear to all the Jamaican people who are watching that in no way, shape, or form is the opposition here saying that we do not support, that we are not in favor, but we're saying that we take issue with how this bill is being put forward. And Senator Crawford this morning, he raised the word truth. He spoke about truth. I want to introduce another T word to the discussion: trust. Trust. Because, Mr. President, what I see happening is that time and time again, the government has gaslit the people of Jamaica. Throughout this pandemic, we can look back at the 2020 election. There were scores of Jamaicans saying, why now? At a time when we were most vulnerable, at a time when we were most uncertain, at a time when we were most exposed, there was an election called. And we talk about political expediency, and we saw the dangers of that in that 2020 election. Since then, Mr. President, I haven't heard one member of the government come back and say to the Jamaican people, we did it wrong, we got it wrong, we put you in danger. And I find that to be so offensive, a prime example of the gaslighting of the Jamaican people. Mr. President, I want to also say that out of that gaslighting, there has been an overwhelming degree of mistrust. And it is this mistrust that comes up every time we talk about postponement of elections. Last time it was done, people took issue. And another thing that we see being raised over time when we bring up this issue of postponement is, where are the fixed terms? Where are the fixed election dates? A promise that was made by the Holness-led administration in 2016. A promise that up to now, in 2022, February of 2022, has not been fulfilled. And so when we see this discussion coming up for postponement, and let me again make it clear that we're not saying that we take issue with the postponement, but what we're saying is that we take issue with how it is being done. And I want to put forward that we take a little bit more time to focus on this issue that constantly rears its head every time we talk about postponement. Fixed election dates. Fixed election dates. If we fail to do it, Mr. President, we create another instance where the people of Jamaica can find no trust in the government. And so I want to put forward, remember I said short remarks, in the words of the PM, who actually served in the National Youth Parliament. She said, we're putting the government on notice. We are putting the government on notice. And here today, yes, Senator Rodriguez, I want to put the government on notice that while we debate this issue of the postponement, there's still another issue, a sore issue, another instance of a promise not fulfilled that stands and needs to be rectified. The Jamaican people are calling for it. Young people especially are saying, where is the fulfillment of this promise? And so here in this place today, I want to make that argument. I want to put forward that time has come for that to become a reality. It cannot be that our first Prime Minister, born post-independence, who proffers himself as a new type of leader, leading a new generation, has come with the same behavior that young people associate with politicians, making all these promises and them never coming to fruition. And so I want to close on that point, that as we discuss postponement, there is an issue that still stands. There's an issue that is important to our democracy. There's an issue that I believe will improve voter participation. There's an issue that I believe will promote trust in the government, and we need to work together. I believe that us on both sides believe that time has come for this to become a reality, fixed election dates. And so, Mr. President, I hope that in the very, very, very near future, we can see this becoming a reality. We can see this coming to the table, and we can see the fulfillment of this promise made to the Jamaican people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris, Gabriel. Senator Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too will be brief in my comments. I know we have other matters to get to, but I could not be in the position that I hold and not make some comments on this very significant bill. Without a doubt, we have had, as the rest of the world, a tumultuous time dealing with this pandemic. And many of our speakers have already elucidated the pros and the cons behind the public health concerns regarding postponement of the local government elections. But as always, I tend to try to also bring something else to the table for us to consider. And in this respect, Mr. President, as one of the, or probably the only person in this chamber who actively treats and deals with the effects of the pandemic directly, actually treat patients and persons who are comorbidly affected with mental health disorders. My colleagues are tired. My colleagues are pushed to the brim. My colleagues also know that with the onset and the announcement of elections, there is a certain level of uncertainty. There's a certain level of stress and apprehension that goes with that. And Mr. President, our population is significantly affected by the impact of this pandemic. And to add another tier of concern can be even more burdensome. And so for especially my colleagues, for especially the impact of this on our psyche, I definitely support us not pushing an agenda that has been pushed much further in the past without any significant consequence. Mr. President, the pandemic is not a static situation. It is one that requires dynamism and flexibility in its management. And that is what our government, with all that has to be considered, is doing. There are times when you have to put certain measures in place for the betterment of the people, and that is exactly what the government is seeking to do. You know, it is not a matter of trying to not honor Senator Morris, a political promise, but you're talking about constitutional reform. That requires much more than just, you know, saying that we're going to do it. And I significantly much better support the proposal by Senator Sinclair. I think it is a very practical one. I think it is one that could be very useful, and as such, in terms of a member made a proposal, and it was a sensible and well thought out one, and I am definitely indicating my support for such. Mr. President, at this time, when I'm not gonna get too detailed about it, but there was mention of a sticky wicket, and I will just close by defining what a delusion is. An idiosyncratic belief or impression maintained despite being contradicted by reality or rational thinking. On that note, Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown, please. Thank you very much, Senator Longmore. Senator Bunting. You can move down. Did I say thank you, Senator Longmore? Thank you, Senator Longmore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bunting.
Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to speak from a seat other than my own. And as Senator Longmore closed with a definition, let me open with one. It's of a word called hubris. It means excessive pride or self-confidence.
Arrogance.
And I remember being in this parliament when a former prime minister of that side got up and wagged his finger at us on this side and said it will be a long time before you ever see that side of the house again. And that's where the 42 came from. So, you know, there are swings and roundabouts, ups and downs.
There are ebbs and flows in politics.
But, Mr. President, if we stick to the stated reasons, those in the memorandum of objects and reasons of this bill to postpone the local government elections, there is little that anyone would disagree with. Certainly, while there have been conflicting studies and opinions and projections on the effectiveness of most of the measures that have been tried or applied, and we recall early in the pandemic there were models by various universities, Imperial College, etc., that said these lockdowns would reduce COVID fatalities by 98% and very high levels. And just this week I saw another one, a meta-analysis by 3 prominent economists that concluded that lockdowns only reduced mortalities by a minuscule 0.2%, while imposing enormous economic and social conditions. And for the average person, it must be very difficult to figure out where in all these conflicting studies and reports the truth lies. So if we want to say, let us err on the side of caution, nobody could reasonably disagree with that. And since everybody's saying personally, I personally expected a postponement. And I think it is the conservative approach. And coming from my background as a banker, we try to err on the side of conservatism and on the side of caution. But it is the reasons given that are not in the memorandum of objects and reasons that creates the distrust and creates the concern that many members have already spoken to. And I think there's one that they've not focused on, and that is a statement recently by the chairman of the Select Committee on Portmore becoming a parish. And he was reported in one of our dailies saying that he expects Portmore to become the 15th parish before this extension expires. And therefore, many members of the public have jumped to the conclusion that the reason, or one of the reasons for this, is to allow Portmore to become a parish. And the expectation is that this will give the government an advantage in controlling the St. Catherine Parish Council, since it is Portmore that now, in the balance, tips it in favor of the PNP.
So saying that's why the November came.
That is in the public domain. Now, that is speculative, but since there have been no other benefits advanced as to why Portmore needs parish status, the ministries, departments, and agencies that appeared before the committee said that service will neither increase nor decrease depending on the designation of Portmore as a parish. The municipal structure in Portmore now was arrived at through extensive consultations with many communities, citizens associations, etc., over many years before they came up and agreed on this structure, which is unique in our democratic system, where the mayor is directly elected, not available to any other municipal corporation or parish councils, as we used to call them. So it leads to a great deal of distrust, because there are all these additional or competing reasons which are put out in the public space. And, you know, when we talk about Portmore, remember that this initiative for the municipality status wasn't really driven by politicians originally. It was people like George Lee, long before he was a politician. It was people like Colin Fagan, long before he was a councillor or MP, who, as I think it was called the Joint Portmore Citizens Association, they had a collective group, and they championed getting Portmore's municipality status. So that's why, Mr. President, the opposition wrote a minority report as an addendum to the report from the Select Committee.
So it's not unanimous as we say.
No, it's not unanimous. Well, if you want to say that because the minority report is part of the report, then the whole was accepted because it includes the minority position, then in that sense you might say, yes, they accepted the report, but there were two clear positions in the report.
Senator Bunting, you know, no doubt you're going to get an opportunity to discuss that at length. But what we're really
since it
dealing
has
with...
been by a senior member of that side, by a senior member of the government, by the chairman of the Select Committee, and giving it that this postponement will allow that to happen,
yeah,
then
but
it
that
must be relevant.
That I don't know when and who said that and in what circumstances. Here, Mr. Sinclair, would you like to take over?
Yes, he will. He told me that person.
Senator Bunting, we're dealing with this here now. The adjournment of the local government election. You have made the point. You speculate that perhaps it's because it has something to do with Portmore, but I'm not going to allow you to go into any long...
Dr. Wheatley said so publicly. Dr. Wheatley, if you don't hear it, that means it didn't happen? No, I'm sorry.
No, please, hello.
Sorry.
No, I don't want this thing to break down, you know. Senator Bunting, hear what I'm telling you. You need to stick to the bill, right? And engaging in a lengthy discourse. No, hold on, man. Just listen to me now.
When Senator Sinclair was going far and wide,
no,
you said he was rolling the sticky wicket.
Everybody get a chance to talk about the sticky wicket. But you've gone beyond the sticky wicket now. You're making a major presentation on Portmore.
No, what I'm speaking
so you need to move on with it.
What I'm speaking about is directly relevant to local government. And the maneuvering.
No, it's not a question. It might be relevant to local government. Is it relevant to the question of the bill before us now? And that's what you need to address. And I don't want to say anymore. I don't want to have to stop you.
The chairman of the parliamentary committee has stated that by postponing the election, it will allow Portmore to become a parish, to be designated a parish within the time of that postponement. So it must be connected. It must be relevant. So, Mr. President.
Stop. Trying to control the debate.
In our half hour, we have discretion over how we choose to debate and what we
absolutely, and I have the overriding authority to keep you within the bounds of the standing order.
I am within the bounds. I am easily within the bounds. But presiding officers must stop inserting themselves into the debate.
Whenever I take the view that I need to insert myself into the discussion, I will do so.
And whenever I take the view that it is improper, I will say so also.
Exactly, very good.
And I will say
so what
also.
I'm telling you here now is that you need to deal with the legislation before you. And
that's what
I'm not going to allow you to give an address on the Portmore, the parish of Portmore. You can do that at another time, no doubt.
This act will allow for the postponement of
and this act allows for it. And I'm not going to continue to go back and forth with the president on the relevance of this, because that is impatient of debate. And the public can draw their own conclusions. So, Mr. President, for clarification, the opposition is not objecting to the postponement of this bill. The reasons given here are fair. It is the points made in the debate by members is raising concerns about a more fundamental issue, and that is trust. Yes. Can we believe the word of the government? And I believe that the greatest friend of truth is time, and time will tell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Bunting. Senator Samuda.
I will be brief, Mr. President.
I notice everybody beginning with that phrase today, but it's not really working out because it's 1 o'clock.
I will attempt to be brief, Mr. President. I also, with your indulgence, would like to acknowledge the members of Generation 2000 who are indeed present here today, and just to wish them well on their 22nd anniversary. I am indeed a proud member of the G2K alumni, as is my government leader, and indeed Senator Gale. Many don't quite remember being a member and being an active member of G2K.
Get so far along.
No, that's not what I'm doing. I'm just making sure that the members are aware of your antecedents.
Thank you.
And, you know, when we speak of being alumnus of organizations, you don't want to hit your fellow alumni in any situation. And I'm also a proud member of the alumni of Campion, as is opposition leader. But we are having a political debate, and I think the nature of the bill before us is indeed as political a bill, leader of the opposition business in the Senate, as is the leader of government business. But, you know, it is as political a topic as you're going to get in this parliament. It is about the holding of local government elections and the permission to postpone it. Now, Senator Bunting said that when you look at the memorandum, you would find it very easy to support, but the suggestions and the comments and what has been put forward during the course of the debate added some lack of, is it fair to say, confusion to how the opposition side. But I think it would be fair to also say that on this side, the presentations made by opposition members have added quite a bit of confusion as to where they indeed stand on the matter. Because on one hand they support it, but on the other hand there are several reasons for doubt. However, Mr. President, what has been interesting, and I think what's appropriate when I think of the presentations made today, and it comes from Shakespeare. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. And this is indeed the political stage, so one understands the posturing that will take place from time to time in a political debate. But I will respond to a few points made because I think it's important for the Hansard, and I take the records of the Hansard particularly. I think it's particularly important that the views are accurately portrayed from this side. Mr. President, let's start with the memorandum and let's start with the bill before us. The discussion around COVID and the government's management of it is, I think, a little unfortunate. If we take back to Senator Scott Motley's position in terms of the fear and trepidation from the first case, and the fact that the last time the world saw anything like this was over 100 years ago, and the fact that so much would have changed, access to travel, movement, speed of movement, there was great fear. And there was correspondingly no playbook to deal with this. The people of Jamaica, in looking at the management of the pandemic, have consistently said they support the way this government has done it. We have done what is situationally appropriate, as we have seen it based on the facts available to us at each stage. So if you look at it in that context, and Oh, sure, no problem. No worries. Yeah. Fogs up the glasses, but no problem. We've done what is situationally appropriate at each step of the way. When one considers the point in which a general election was called, it was at a stage where cases were much lower than they are now. It was at a stage where the positivity rate was significantly lower than it was now. And it was at a stage where the country needed the certainty, the predictability, and the stability from knowing who the next administration would be. And the country at that stage sent a resounding message of confidence, a resounding signal that this is the government they wanted. And much has been made about the fact that we're indeed standing in the aisleway, but that should be the symbol that indeed the country supported the decision then. You know, a lot is often made about the turnout, and a lot was made about whether or not people vote in or vote out government. A lot should be made about those who choose to stay away because they didn't see, especially the base of a political party that didn't turn out. A lot should be made of that because they didn't see their political side that they've been loyal to as a viable option at that time. But what was not clear from the comments from my colleagues in the opposition was that when this election was called, and to his credit, the only opposition voice I heard clamoring for no elections, to be fair, was Senator Crawford. I sat in the chamber when the elections were called, as in the well. I came to Parliament on that day. And I remember right where Senator Bunting sat, I believe it was leader of opposition business in the House, was, name soon come back to me. Then it was Peter Phillips, and it was Mark Golden as opposition spokesman on finance. No one in the front row, and why that's important is because he's the current leader of the party. No one in the front row showed any trepidation, any concern. It was in fact greeted with celebration and welcome. The PNP welcomed the calling of elections then. The factors related to COVID settled in their minds that it was a good time for an election. The statements then from the president of the People's National Party and leader of the opposition was welcome. There was in fact a statement from the party right after that came out and put it in ink that they welcomed the election. So the public should not be misled to believe that there was any pushback in any major way from the PNP for the elections. They welcomed it. They didn't welcome the result, but they welcomed the calling of the elections. That's the first point. A lot has also been made, and I like the term, and you know, I'm a fan of Senator Brown's debate style. He's a very effective politician in the Senate, and there's no doubt about that, and I give him credit where it is due. And he used that term, and for those who like cricket like myself, sticky wicket. I thought it was very interesting. But I'm going to enter one now formally, not sotto voce, which is a sticky seat. Based on the current state of the opposition, based on the current metrics being used to determine the state of the government, it is indeed not a sticky wicket that we're batting on. It is indeed sticky seats on that side, because there's no chance of getting up from those seats on that side anytime soon. And that is indeed the fact. So I also don't want the public to be misled that the opposition is indeed uncomfortable with the delays in election now. In the same way, they shouldn't be misled that the PNP didn't welcome the calling of elections then. Their own assessments, and we use polls, we use canvassing for those at home who don't necessarily get deeply involved in the politics. I know I'm a fan of the market research process. I'm a fan of the polls, and I know they see some of the same data that I would see. They would know, as I do, that the prospects of their party and of their leader have not improved from the last round. They haven't. They just haven't. What has increased is awareness of who the leader is of their party. The affinity scores have not. Which means, if you take where those scores are, the prospects don't look so good right now. As Senator Sinclair said, as Senator Williams said, as all of my colleagues on this side have said, this decision is not made because of political concern. This decision is made because it is the best thing for Jamaica at this time to not put $1 billion into this space. It is the best thing to not risk a public health emergency or to go through another wave before it is likely to happen again. That's just the facts. We are very comfortable with where we stand politically. There is no doubt in that space, and I think that point needs to be made, Mr. President. The last point I will make, because I think it's important to rebut, is this discussion about Portmore. Now, I'm an avid political watcher, right? I love politics in all territories.
You will remember that I stopped Mr. Bunting on the Portmore issue, right? You remember that?
I remember him going on a little after you stopped him as well, though, President.
Okay. So all you need to do is relate it to this seat here?
Sure. And I am, President. Portmore, St. Catherine, despite when elections are indeed called for local government, that is not one of the parishes that will be competitive right now, Mr. President. And that is a point to be made. My own analysis, and as a political observer, as somebody who loves to study the politics, there are only two municipalities that will be competitive, and that is indeed not one. So that is a smoke screen. It is to try and give some political ulterior motive to why elections have been delayed. That's not where you're going to be competitive. And I am indeed, all politicians that are students of politics and enjoy the political process, I'm indeed looking forward to it. No, the wool over your eyes is from your colleagues who giving the impression that they're uncomfortable with elections not being called now. The facts remain, my colleague and friend, is that they're quite happy with the additional time because it protects them for September. Mr. President, with that I close, and thank you for the...
Members would have heard the question that the Senate be permitted to sit beyond 1:30 to complete the business of the day. Those in favor? Against? Mr. Blake, Senator Morris is speaking. Thank you, Senator Samuda.
Yeah, I don't need it. I don't need it.
Senator Dr. Morris.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to give my support to the legislation. And as I give my support to the legislation, I want to make it abundantly clear to young Senator Rodriguez. Yes, it's what I see. And to my colleague friend Samuda, Matthew, that it is perfectly in order for an individual to express support for a legislation and at the same time express his or her opposition to aspects of the bill or relating to the legislation. Perfectly in order. Because no bill comes to this parliament to be with utmost perfection. There are issues that will come from time to time. And so you agree with the legislation in principle. But there are issues relating to it that you might disagree with. So it is perfectly in order for you to express your support and at the same time express your concerns. I want to also point out, Mr. President, you know, I heard the references, some sotto voce, some explicit, about possible internal challenges in the organization that we are a part on this side.
But you're not going to take on that. You're not going to take on that, Senator Morris.
And I want to say, Mr. President, that in every political organization, you know, you go and you have your differences. But I am telling you that if there is one thing that is absolutely clear, we on this side, fully united behind the current leader, Mark Jefferson Golding, for the People's National Party.
Senator Morris, I'm happy to hear that, but perhaps a press conference.
And leave it alone, Mr. President.
But move on, please.
You are the presiding officer, so leave that alone. Let us down here on the floor. Let us down here on the floor battle that out.
No, but I have to remind you to just stick with the legislation.
Yes, you know, let the politicians on the floor battle that out.
The president said, don't remind him of 2015 when Andrew was on probation.
Very much so. Another point that I want to make, Mr. President, and you know, Senator Lambert Brown spoke about the sticky wicket in which the government is batting. You know, Mr. President, just this week, we experienced a massive devastation in Port Maria, St. Mary, my neck of the woods, 2 miles from the town center that I am from. And when I went down there, and a lot of the people who have been affected are people that I know personally, and I express
Mr. President, on a point of order, please.
No, I am on my feet, you know. I am.
Senator Morris, he's raising on a point of order.
Relevance to
1
the bill.
minute, Senator Sinclair.
Yes.
Senator Morris, just have a seat for me, please. Let me hear what Senator Sinclair is saying. Yes, Senator Sinclair.
Mr. President, the relevance to the bill, unless the goodly senator is going to say that the mayor, Richard Query, has handled that issue very well so far. But point of order is irrelevant about flooding to this bill.
But I don't make the point. I don't make the point.
Senator.
I don't make the point yet.
Senator Morris, you can continue.
Thank you, Mr.
You can
President.
continue talking about the legislation that is before you.
Yes, Mr. President.
No doubt, the state of the flooding in Port Maria is of interest to all of us, but perhaps on another time.
Yes, Mr. President, and you know that is why before an individual raises a point of order, you have to listen to what the speaker is saying before you raise a point of order. You can't make a point of order when you don't know what the person is saying. It is being preemptive. So, Mr. President, I make the point that the flooding took place in Port Maria, St. Mary, and a lot of one of the major reasons for the flooding in the town center is because of improper disposal of garbage.
Senator Morris, you know, I'm not going to allow you to continue.
Yes.
You're going to have a chance You're going to have a
Mr.
chance
President,
at some future day to talk about
you have to
garbage
be
collection.
fair, Mr. President, because if it is that we are talking about the management of municipalities, which is linked to the legislation, Mr. President, we have to understand that a part of the sticky wicket is how the government has managed or not managed the garbage disposal process in our country. And that has contributed to the flooding in St. Mary.
Yes,
and I want to say, Mr. President, we are committed to ensuring that we put in place a set of programs and policies that when we return to government, that the concerns of the people, whether it be it in Portmore, whether it be it in St. Mary, are fully dealt with, Mr. President. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Morris. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, allow me to say that I'm very pleased that the last three speakers made clear the fact that the opposition supports the postponement proposed. Because understanding Senator Morris's intended guidance, certainly we on this side are quite clear that one can take an overall supportive view and still find room to query particular aspects or to critically analyze. But I think the point which Senator Samuda was making, and certainly our sentiment on this side, was that it had not in fact been made clear prior to those last speakers that the opposition did in fact support it. The arguments were in several directions and certainly at odds with what had even been said in that other place. So we were unclear, legitimately so. So I'm pleased to, more than stylistic, we were objectively unclear as to what was actually being put forward. So I'm pleased to know that there is at the core of the opposition's perspective today support for the postponement which has been proposed. I just want to, along that line, make clear that I think some of the arguments that were put forward really should be exposed for their lack of comprehension of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Because I think that to argue that, or to seek to use an analogy, that the world has not ended despite torrential rainfall and the damage that has been caused, shows a missing of the point between the response to an act of God versus the taking of a concerted decision by government, which could foreseeably create a negative consequence for the people of Jamaica based on the information that you have available at the time. It's a fundamental difference. Similarly, the comparisons raised with St. Lucia that had a 7-day average of 11 cases at the time that they held their election, and only the alpha present in their community at the time. The fact that St. Lucia, Omicron had clearly not appeared. Barbados had a 50+% vaccination rate at the time they called theirs. Again, all of these sort of failed analogies demonstrate a missing of or a misunderstanding of the circumstances within which Jamaica finds herself at this point of time. Not only the number of positive cases, but the number of healthcare workers affected, the positivity rate, the low vaccination rate, all matters which we want to go in the right direction and continue to encourage them so to do. I note that Senator Crawford had his usual very sort of circuitous argument that you have to pay particular attention, and I hope he's listening to try to follow as he argues in himself and outside and against himself. But, we love him dearly. But it really does take a lot of focus to follow. And I just wanted to say that there will always be a need to balance the circumstances at the particular point in time, to assess them as best as possible on the professional advice in the circumstances. And you balance the risk and the potential consequence. And I think this is in response to several of Senator Scott Motley's arguments as well. I think, Senator Crawford's almost challenge that he doesn't want to hear the calling of it within this period or that we would never be able to call because the circumstances will never allow, there will always be challenges. Just saying that, again, this misses the point of the delicacy of the circumstances, the dynamism of the circumstances, which I think is a phrase used by Senator Longmore earlier, that have made this a truly unprecedented time. And as Senator Samuda rightly emphasized in his presentation, the fact that this is a once-in-a-100-year type event just demonstrates the need to actually have a higher concept of the flexibility that's needed and the uncertainty, notwithstanding, that's put on the table for us at all times as leaders. Senator Gabrielle Morris said that she's concerned that the government has not kept its promise to the people of Jamaica, and I just want to put her at ease, because the victory we had at the polls, it's not really a function of arrogance when we speak about it, but it is because it was that we had, in a historically unprecedented manner, delivered on our promises to the people for more water, better roads. We created record low unemployment, created more jobs, closed that gender gap to must be 2.6% when it had always been double for decades. The fact that we ensured that we provided the list is going to go on too long, and I'm reminded. So the matter of fixed election date will be dealt with as a function of constitutional reform. The Prime Minister has appointed a minister who is responsible for legal and constitutional affairs. One does not get everything done within the time that one originally sets, but I want to put Senator Morris at ease in her challenge and just congratulate her on her fearless manner. As a young upcoming politician, I personally congratulate you on that and encourage you in your continued growth. But say that this administration has, or rather, Jamaica has been set back by the pandemic, undoubtedly, but we will get back on track, and we are focused on that. Without delaying much further, Mr. President, recognizing that we do have more business to do today and staff does require refreshment. So I would like, Mr. President, if we could close this debate now, as I thank all colleagues for their presentations and ask for second reading of the bill.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. The question is that the bill be read for a second time. Those in favour? Against?
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm as Lawful all acts and omission relating to the approval granted by the Governor General for an early retirement of general election. Give me a copy. That's wrong. Sorry about that. Yes, that's the right one. Yes, a bill entitled An Act to Temporarily Modify the Representation of the People Act in order to postpone the holding of a general election of members to serve on the respective councils of municipal corporations and a general election of mayors of city municipalities read a second time.
That's a very unusual slip for you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. Thank you, Marshall. I put clauses 1 and 2. Those in favour? Against? I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Against? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Against? I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for third reading of the bill.
Thank you.
Sorry.
The question is that the bill be read for a third time. Those in favor? Against? Madam Clerk?
A bill entitled An Act to Temporarily Modify the Representation of the People Act in order to postpone the holding of a general election of members to serve on the respective councils of municipal corporations and a general election of the mayors of city municipalities read a third time and passed.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Following consultation with the clerk and limited consultation with both leaders, I'm going to rise until
President,
5 past
just
2.
before you rise.
Yes.
The next item on the agenda ought not to be a long item. There are at least 5 members of the Senate. There are at least 5 members of the Senate who sat on the Joint Select Committee who have all signed off on this. And it's my understanding on this side that we do not intend to speak on it unless the other side wishes to engage in a debate, because the bill has to come arising from the acceptance of this report. And I would urge that we just proceed to the next item and adjourn thereafter. May it please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've heard Senator Brown, and notwithstanding his impassioned plea and the support that he got from all the members, this Senate will now rise. Thank you. Thank you. Senator Samuda. Senator Samuda, 1 minute, please. I'm going to agree with the request. Obviously, it has some support. Madam Clerk, I'm going to ask that you just indicate to the members that hopefully will be finished shortly, and to members who are here from the ministry. I ask your forbearance. Senator Samuda, you can continue, sir. Thank you very much, Minister Samuda.
Thank you, Mr. President. The matter before us is indeed the Joint Select Committee report on the Joint Select Committee to review and report on the law reform zones of special operations, special security, Community Development Measures Act 2017. I think this follows a trend that when we have Joint Select committees where there is heavy participation from members in the Senate, that the bills and their debates tend to flow pretty well. I think we saw that on the BOJ Act. We saw that with the second round of NIDS, and it is certainly the indication from colleague Senator Brown that that will indeed be the modus operandi this afternoon. Mr. President, presented for the consideration of this honourable House, or this honourable Senate, is the report of the Joint Select Committee established, as mentioned, to review and report on the law reform zones of special operations, special security and community development measures Act 2017. This report, Mr. President, was adopted in the House of Representatives on January 25th, 2022. Allow me, Mr. President, to remind this honourable Senate that the Act was introduced to address the high level of crime and violence within vulnerable communities, while also ensuring the preservation of fundamental rights and freedoms of the citizens living within the zones. It was also concurrently conceptualized to deal with the significant levels of social degradation in these communities. Mr. President, the mandate of the Act is accomplished using a three-phased approach. That is the clear, hold, and build strategy. I think generally this has received support from both sides of the aisle in both houses. Since the passage of the Act, the Prime Minister has declared 7 geographical areas ZOSOs, as per Section 4 of said Act. These areas include Mount Salem on September 17, 2017, Denham Town, October 17, 2017, Greenwich Town, July 1, 2020, August Town, July 8, 2020, Norwood, June 20, 2021, Parade Gardens, January 9, 2022, and Savannah Lamar, January 16, 2022. It was determined that these geographical areas met the criteria of rampant criminality, gang warfare, escalating violence and murder, and threat to rule of law and public order, which presented and continues to wreak havoc on the citizens within these volatile communities and the operations of the security forces. Mr. President, I'm going to condense much of what was here. Needless to say, the areas which have benefited from the declarations of ZOSOs have seen precipitous falls in all categories of criminality. One which I think is particularly noteworthy is indeed the Norwood Declaration, which has seen no murders and shootings since within the zone. Not to say on the periphery or in relative proximity you don't have issues, but certainly within the zone it has given citizens that reprieve. The part of this act that gives me a great feeling of joy when I see them is indeed the social intervention reports that come to this chamber, I think, in line with the reporting cycles. When you see all the work that is done in Mount Salem or August Town or Greenwich Farm or indeed Denham Town, it should give you hope that indeed what we are doing is transforming the lives of those who live in these areas. Mr. President, I will now highlight the major recommendations outlined in the report for debate today, which, as mentioned, Mr. President, has the support from both sides. The first...
Senator Brown is suggesting that you take it as read, but I don't think you should.
Well, if there is consensus, which is not all that common, but I am prepared, if there is consensus on both sides, to take the report indeed as read. I think the Joint Select Committee would have benefited from significant and generally very healthy debate. And to be fair also, there was high attendance, as we see in the report from the signatures. So with that, Mr. President, I invite contributions, if there are any, to the debate.
Thank you, Senator Shamuda.
Mr. President, in the spirit of cooperation that I think should be encouraged, let me also commend the members of this Joint Select Committee, particularly the members from the Senate, who's, it's unusual to look at the appendix that carries the attendance and see such strong attendance, perfect attendance by Senator Brown, for example. And I would say that the ZOSA legislation, or more technically the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017, has from its inception had the support of the opposition. We felt it was an enhanced security measure without the negatives of the states of emergency, without unnecessary suspension of people's constitutional rights. And we see where it is being used and getting the results we had anticipated. We would encourage more extensive use of ZOSOs as we go forward. And with those few words, we'd say the opposition welcomes the report. We participated and supported its decisions, and we look forward to the bill with these amendments coming to the Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I really will be brief this time around. No, but in the spirit of cooperation, I will not give in to usual temptations for, what is it, Jekyll and Hyde, as you refer to it. But just to say, this is a policy that has national support. It is a law that its implementation will benefit from the consultation across the aisle. It, like all other things, is not the silver bullet and panacea, but it is an important tool as we try to bring safety and security to all of our citizens. It is a law that we are indeed proud of. Mr. President, I indeed look forward to the continued return to economic buoyancy so that we will be able to afford to put in place more ZOSOs, as they are particularly capital-intensive measures. There's no doubt that we need dozens more based on the profile of many of our communities and the issues that they face from rampant criminality and the social degradation that has happened over a period of years. Mr. President, I ask that the report be adopted.
Thank you very much, Minister Samuda. The question is that the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to review the law reform, zones of special operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017 be adopted. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is not intended to...
Pay attention to the minister, please.
Thank you. Mr. President, might I ask for recommittal of the item, notices of motion given orally.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move, be it resolved, with reference to the sessional select, joint select and select committees which are appointed in the current session of Parliament, and where these committees have not completed their deliberations, that in the new session of Parliament, this Honourable Senate be empowered to enable these committees to proceed with the issues referred to them from the stage reached before prorogation. Be it further resolved that the composition of all these committees remain unchanged, except where necessary by further motion taken and approved by this Honourable Senate. And be it further resolved, with reference to the matters identified below, which are included in the order of business in this session of Parliament, but for which deliberations have not been completed, that in the new session of Parliament, the Senate be empowered to proceed with them from the stage reached before prorogation. 1, all items under private members' motions, and 2, all matters referred to committees. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you very much. A public business?
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Mr. President, I ask that the motion be approved.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Mr. President, it is now not intended to do any further business today. Might I ask that the Senate be adjourned?
Members would have recognized that this would be the last meeting for this session. Next week, Thursday, I think, is the opening of Parliament. I urge leaders on both sides to correspond with the clerk to identify the procedures for next week, Thursday. I think there may be some changes as to how we usually operate. In fact, we may have returned to the original format, so please check with the clerk to make sure. Is that right, Madam Clerk? I thought so. This Honourable Senate now stands adjourned.